Hello, people, and welcome back to the Tech of Tomorrow podcast with Sebastian Hidalgo. I am Sebastian Hidalgo, deciding to keep the intro short for today. Just remember, like, subscribe, leave a comment, follow the show on Spotify. The more you do that, the more you help me, and the more you signal me that you like this stuff, and I can keep bringing on cool guests like our guest today. Our guest today has been part of three exits and one IPO. He's the author of Authentic Selling: How to Use the Principles of Sales in Everyday Life, and the book also, How Boys Learn. He's Jeff Kirchick, and I'm super happy to have him. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I know we're really looking forward to this one. You and I have had some great conversations over the last couple weeks, so I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, listen, it's been good meeting you over LinkedIn. It has proven, for me, coming from Twitter, originally that was my main social media platform before the whole purpose of it got defeated. It's great to see how easy it is to network on LinkedIn and meet great people. Do you use it that way too? Have you noticed that?
I do, yeah, absolutely. I have a really good friend who I've made through LinkedIn named Carson Hetty, who works at Microsoft. He's a, kind of a thought leader in the sales industry. He's written a bunch of books, and we've been recording content on like a weekly, bi-weekly basis over the last 3 or 4 years. I think since COVID is when we met. That's just one example of many. And even this, budding relationship between you and I is another great example. I think, yeah, I had no idea who you were until started seeing some of the content you were sharing, which was probably because you started engaging with some of the content I was sharing. And I think you share some really great content, which is awesome. And you build great friendships this way. You learn a lot. You get access to different professional communities because of this. So I think it's been, I made a decision maybe 4 or 5 years ago to start being a little more intentional about having a professional presence on LinkedIn and maybe like a brand to go with that. And it's my goal wasn't anything selfish really. It was just I thought it would you know, help me give to others and help me maybe meet new people. And it's really done a lot more than that. So.
It's pretty good. I only knew LinkedIn at the beginning last year when I seriously started as like this recruiting and business development platform. Turns out the social side of the social media is pretty strong over there. Really like grateful for it. It's a great platform. Also, how long have you been active on LinkedIn for?
I mean, I've had it probably for like 15 years or something like that, but in terms of like truly being active and being intentional about posting once a day, I would say over maybe the last 5 years. So a lot of people on the platform are probably familiar with Richard Harris and Scott Leese, who are two, sales consultants, and they run the Surf and Sales event in Costa Rica every year. And I had gone to that event maybe like 5 years ago, and one of my goals that I announced to the group coming out of it was that I was going to try to build a personal or I guess professional brand. And that's when I started posting, you start small, once a week, and then you kind of build it up to once a day and kind of went from there.
I love it because you built something pretty solid for yourself. It's in terms of personal brand, and I don't know if you noticed that, but many leaders, especially the more corporate it gets, the more you see this, they are hesitant about the idea of building a personal brand because they think they need to be sharing their kids and their pets and become influencers. But first of all, it's not like that. Second of all, it's something I would recommend, if anything, for the network aspect, the doors it opens. How do you see that? Do
Yeah.
you feel that resistance over there in the US to building personal brands if you're in like a higher up?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody kind of comes about it in a different way. Some people are really just scared to open up and they don't really know how or what other people might be interested in. And the thing that I always tell to people that I mentor, like people who are interested in breaking into tech sales, because I want them to be authentic in their interview, and really explain what they truly want for themselves and not what they think the company wants to hear. What I tell them is like, look, your story to you might be boring because it's what you experience every day. So to you, it's very banal and it's trite. But to other people, it's fascinating, right? Like other people's stories are always very interesting because it's not us, you know? And so I think people get scared about what they want to share on there. And they don't realize that some of the stories they have are actually quite interesting to other people. And I think once people get over that hump, and they just lean into, I think, presenting an honest version of themselves, it really works. I will say, and I don't want to be negative, but I think sometimes you can also see right through a lot of the so-called influencers who are putting out content that maybe they feel is aligned to what they think people want to see versus what they actually want to share. And there's a difference, right? You can kind of tell when someone's just like a content person and they're, you know, kind of trying to sell you something in a way. Maybe that's just me. But I like when people kind of just, go out there and share kind of what's on top of their mind, which is what I think is great about what you share, Sebastian. Like you give great actionable tips. Like when I read some of the content you share, I'm like, man, that's a really good idea. I'm gonna start implementing that. So I think that's what I would advise people to do is just don't have an agenda. And I know it's counterintuitive, but if you don't have an agenda and you just lean into being you, people will be a lot more interested in it than you think.
I agree. And thank you, by the way. The way I do content is I sit down one day and I observe myself, meaning I watch a recording of a sales call and go, "Okay, what did I do there? And then why did I do it? Which then comes down to something that probably you did also with your book is writing down on paper the stuff you do, you know, you do unconsciously because you're just used to doing that stuff and you see it in action. You think about it and you go, oh, I did that. And I learned that back then in that situation. And I can teach that to someone, which again is how also my sales training came together because I had all this knowledge to put together in one system. And then it was for myself. And then I went, this could help other people. So that's also that's where the content comes from, basically. Me observing stuff that I do or I think.
I love it. It's like a form of like sales meditation. You're like you're observing you in the unconscious way and kind of looking at why you do the things you do and exploring it, getting to a true sense of, what it was behind that and then sharing it with others. And I think that's a great way to come about organic, meaningful content.
And how did you get into sales talking about stories?
Sure.
How did your
Uh,
career start?
sure. So yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate growing up. I went to Princeton for my undergrad, and I only mention this because there was a real dichotomy between, me and a lot of the other kids there. Princeton has a lot of high achieving people that went into, law and medicine or consulting or banking and things like that. And a lot of these kids kind of they know their freshman year that this is what they want to do. They come on campus and they know that this is what they want to do. For me, I was a little bit more all over the place. I was interested in a lot of different things. And I had worked in sports. I had worked for the Boston Red Sox. So I looked at jobs in sports. I also looked at jobs in teaching and coaching. So, coaching wrestling and being like an English teacher or something like that. And eventually, when I was looking at all these different jobs, I came across something on the job board that said the harder you work, the more money you'll make. And that really resonated with me. It was a sales job for a company called Level Up in Boston. And this company, many years later, would get acquired by Grubhub for about $400 million. So it was a really successful mobile payments company. It was the first time I'd thought about going into sales. And obviously, everyone is financially motivated in some way, whether they admit it or not. Money is a conduit to things that people want for themselves. So obviously that was part of what, stuck out to me with that message. But it actually wasn't just the money, it was more the agency. It was more the idea that I had control over my own destiny. And that's something that I really, really value about sales. I wrestled in high school and for parts of college. I wasn't amazing, but wrestling is a sport that is really up to you, and it's a mental game. And it's very physical and it's very challenging. And It is also a team sport. You play with a team, but you also are an individual contributor. And I think the wrestling mentality is very similar to the sales mentality. It's really up to you. If you win, it's because you worked hard enough and you got it done. And if you failed, then you've got to learn what went wrong and work to get it fixed and address it. So that's why I got into sales, and I've never looked back. I think that I've got great exposure to player coach type roles, leadership roles, individual contributor roles. And there's a lot of really cool things about all of those different types of roles, but sales is a unique sport, and I'm very grateful that I fell into it.
It's funny. I didn't do wrestling. I was more into kickboxing, that side of combat sports, and I always see the similarities between that and sales and business. And I had on the podcast last week this guy that he was a professional dancer, and he
Wow.
does see a lot of similarities between dancing and selling and doing business, which is sports is a great conduit to everything that involves, you know, taking the reins of your own destiny.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it makes you feel it makes you feel like personally responsible for the outcome. And I think, growth is really important. A lot of people probably are familiar with the book mindset, which is just about the growth mindset and always trying to get better. And I think in sales, one of the great things about it is that when you lose, you're really forced to understand why, and there's always ways that you can learn to get better because of being forced to be very introspective about the losses. And let's face it, in sales, even the best people, even the ones that are on LinkedIn telling you how they made $1 million a year, $2 million a year, whatever, these people still lose more than they win, right? And so the learning opportunity, the growth opportunity for salespeople just to get better is constant. It's like no other profession. I think that the way, you can get so much, you can get so good so fast if you really apply yourself. And I just think that that's unique about, what we do.
It's interesting, right? Because people see somebody like you, like me, talking about sales on the internet, teaching sales, writing books about sales in your case. And they think, oh my God, these guys must have a like 100% close rate. It's just not the case, right? We lose all the time. I think we just developed the skill of looking at what we fucked up and seeing, here's why it went wrong, and here's how next time or over the next month I'm gonna work on this one thing until I get it right. It's no different from sports in that way.
Exactly. Like in sports, what you're trying to do is build a framework to optimize your chances of success, So, I played soccer as well, and there's different types of formations you can put on the field and different types of strategies that you can deploy. But it doesn't mean you're going to win every game, even if you deploy the best strategy. You're just trying to optimize. You're saying if we played this game 1,000 times, this is the one where we think we would win the most times, right? And so that's what you're kind of doing in sales too. It's no different. You're looking at the wins and the losses, you're looking at the data, and you're making adjustments to give yourself the best possible chance to succeed. And so, yeah, I think it's a great parallel.
Yes, and so you mentioned in your LinkedIn profile that you were part of three exits and one IPO. How how did you get into those companies? What was it like to be part of those processes? Because every founder wants to have an exit, and every CEO at some point has dreamed about, okay, my God, IPO.
Sure. Yeah, and some of these I would say I was more integral to the success than others, and some of them were better outcomes than others. But it was cool to be able to say that I was part of, various companies that either exited or IPO'd or things like that. The one that sorry, the one that had one of the first one that I was at right out of college that I mentioned was the one that, had a pretty solid exit. I had left well before the exit. It was my first job out of school. I was there for like a few years and moved on to Chegg, which while I was there had its IPO. And I was a regional sales manager while I was at Chegg. I was actually working for one of the companies that they acquired called Zinch. So it was one of their subsidiaries that I was working for. But it was kind of cool to be on the inside of that, seeing like the preparation for what happens for a company that's about to go public. And then, that's actually when I joined NextCaller. I joined as NextCaller's first employee. maybe a little over a decade ago, right before they got into Y Combinator. And I would say that's probably the company where I had more of a, um, more of a impact in terms of the outcome. I was the sales leader there. It was a smaller company, was there for 7.5 years, and the company was acquired by Pindrop Security. I like to joke about, the show Silicon Valley. I think a lot of people that are watching this, I assume, would have watched the show Silicon Valley. And, everything that happened on that TV show kind of happened in that startup. All the good and the bad things, all the funny things that happened in the show kind of happened there too. So it was a little bit too close for home. But I will say, I think the biggest lesson I learned while I was there was just not quitting. And in startups, it can be very easy to give up. There's always someone knocking on your door that's going to offer you more money to do something cool. And in the early days, you got to kind of suck it up and you really got to see the long-term vision. And there's going to be bad things that happen where you need to be able to ride the emotional roller coaster, as I put it. And there were many times where it would have been easy to give up there where I didn't. And I was proud of myself for kind of hanging my head in there. And so, yeah, we got a good outcome there. And then the company that I was at after that was called Able AI. That was acquired by Moody's Analytics earlier this year. And again, I was coming in there as like the first sales hire, and we had great team there, which I think was the biggest takeaway. Probably one of the most talented teams I've ever worked with was at that company. We had great founders, great engineers, great sales talent in terms of, RevOps, sales engineering, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that was the journey. And, I'm going to be starting a new thing actually next week. So hopefully that one will be a good one too.
It's gonna be interesting. We'll not ask you much about that, just in case the stuff you cannot share. But I will ask you, you know, what are the more common mistakes that you see startups making when it comes to their sales? Because I know many startup founders. Most of them are technical founders, which usually it's like 98% of cases means they're really bad at sales. So what are some,
Yep.
like, if a founder is watching this, what would you tell them?
Oh man, I've got like we could be here all day. But I'll just give you some of the basic ones. I think first and foremost, like the number one mistake is understanding the right time to hire sales and the right persona to hire. Um, Companies go through different phases of achieving product market fit, going out into the market and trying to understand, where the low-hanging fruit is and achieving, good unit economics and then kind of scaling from there. But sometimes founders will skip that step. In other words, like they will hire before they've truly achieved product market fit. They start hiring and investing in sales before they know that they have product market fit or really where they should be focusing the product and even where they should be in the market. That's probably the number one mistake is like hiring too soon or even hiring too senior too soon. A lot of times, like a founder really should, in my opinion, really should be doing those initial sales for a period of time. And a VP of sales is a very expensive hire. And so, I think getting like a founding AE is oftentimes a good idea. Somebody who is more entrepreneurial. And again, this is another nuanced mistake is that a lot of times that first sales hire is really just like a cold-blooded killer. And that's not necessarily what you want for your first sales hire. Because in the early days, you don't really know what to expect, and you might churn that person if they're not doing well or making a lot of money. You really want an entrepreneur in that seat, someone who's willing to give you product feedback and help you understand where to focus your time and energy. So I think these are like some of the biggest mistakes. And also, like I will say, this is not true of some of the founders I've worked with before, but I do think that a lot of times founders are a little bit out of touch with the value of salespeople. We all know, we've all seen the metric that what is it, like 17 or 18 months is the average tenure for a VP of sales in the SaaS world today. We have to ask ourselves a question. Are the VP of sales just shitty? Or is there a bigger problem that's going on in terms of expectations and are these people just being set up to fail? And a lot of times investors are really, in my experience, not great at pushing back at very aggressive investors. They are sometimes not, if they come from a technical background, they might not really understand the worth of a VP of sales. They might resent the VP of sales making a lot of money, things like that. So, I think that you want to make sure that if you're going to hire someone that's expensive, they're in a position to make that money because there's a market for these people. They will churn and all that stuff too. So I think there's a lot to be said there, but the biggest one is about timing. And then probably what would come next is around expectation setting, clear expectations, and really being able to deliver on promises to the people that you bring in, and not sell them on a vision that you're not entirely sure about. I think those are probably the biggest, sales related mistakes that I see in early stage companies.
Then let's move it up one level. What do you see in B2B tech sales? More experience, bigger companies. What are people doing wrong there?
In bigger companies,
Yes, like B2B, bigger companies, mature companies already.
yeah. So, I mean, I talk a little bit about this in my book, but I do think that in a lot of bigger companies, the biggest mistake they make is that um, they're overly regimented. They are overly, um, they are investing too much in ensuring that everyone is adhering to a specific process. And the reason I say that is because process is not always really linear in a way. In other words, like there are, and I think Matt Green from Sales Assembly actually posted something about this the other day, which I'm having it's like having trouble kind of like remembering the exact details of it, but it was very aligned to my thought process as well, which is that these sales conversations are all very nuanced. The way that you go through a deal, if you are thinking about it through the lens of process, it will organically make that salesperson lose their authenticity because they have an agenda now in every meeting. They're trying to align to a specific process that the sales leader has built. And I think we're a lot better off if we actually think about process as more of a qualification criteria. Process kind of just tells us where we are in terms of forecasting a deal, but it's not necessarily how we incentivize people to move through the deal. In other words, just because one step is after the next doesn't mean that we shouldn't actually go backwards to take two steps forward. And look, a lot of companies still get this right. They are good at coaching this and they are good at helping their reps to understand the nuance, but I will say a lot of them are not good at it. A lot of them are really making their salespeople robots. And they're saying in this next call, you need to get this information, you need to get this stakeholder involved. And that's just not an organic way to win a deal. And I think like people can feel that energy coming from the salesperson. They can feel when they are just kind of pushing for something that they're being told to push for. And they can tell when you are doing something because you are doing it out of the goodness of your heart because you think it's the right thing to do. We aren't stupid, right? Human beings have intuition, for all our faults. That's one of our positive traits is that we have relatively good intuition about others and what their intentions are. So I think that that's the biggest mistake is that we oftentimes turn people into robots. And as my book outlines, in a world of AI, if that's what you're doing, well, guess what? You might be out of a job because the robot can take your job at that point. So that's I think the biggest mistake.
You put me on two paths here that I wanted to cover. Let's cover AI, right? I,
Okay.
I see, I completely get why AI is so pivotal and a groundbreaking technology, whatever. I don't see it replacing salespeople for exactly the reasons you just laid out. Because yes, will it enhance? Will it does it make it better even for me right now? I watch recording, I watch tape, I have transcripts, I have AI summaries, I can send everything over, automate it over to Slack. It's cool, but I don't see AI replacing salespeople because sales interactions still will always have to involve a human, especially the bigger. Maybe you can get away with that in some B2B small transaction, but the bigger the deal gets, the more people need to be involved. We need humans. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. I mean, that's very in keeping with what I talk about in the book, which is that, you know, in a world of AI, well, first of all, what I say is like, there's two reasons why this is true. First and foremost, what engenders trust is honesty. It's when you present an honest version of yourself. So when I talk about authenticity, what I mean by authenticity is the way you would treat a family member or your best friend, but actually, like the best definition is what I just said. It's presenting an honest version of you. And it's really important, Sebastian, to understand that that doesn't mean people need to like you. It doesn't mean that, when you go to Vegas, partying or whatever, that you're the first person they're going to call. What it does mean is that when they need someone to babysit their kid, then maybe you're top of mind because you're someone that they believe you when you say things. And I give a lot of examples of this in other talks, and some people don't like these examples for certain reasons, but like, you know, Dennis Rodman is an example of somebody who's very authentic. Now, he's not necessarily a great person. He there's a lot of bad things that Dennis Rodman has done. Just want to be very clear about this. But he is an authentically weird guy. He's not acting. A lot of like celebrities and athletes are pretending to be weird. They want attention. Dennis Rodman is weird and he doesn't care and he leans into it. And because of that, there's a dictator in North Korea who wants to be his best friend and he hates the rest of us. Okay. Now, again, I'm not saying being best friends with Kim Jong-un is a good idea. It's in fact a really bad idea. But there is something to be said there. Why does he trust this guy? He trusts him because when he says things, he believes what he's saying. And AI can't do that. That's the big thing. AI doesn't have a soul. AI, let's say you're a company and you program your AI to talk to people. Well, guess what? The AI was programmed by a company that wants to sell you a widget, right? So there's fundamentally no trust that can occur there because you know that there's an agenda behind, what the AI is saying and doing. So that's what on an emotional and psychological level, that is why AI will never fully replace salespeople. Now, it's a loaded question because AI can still replace some salespeople, and there are some scenarios where AI can replace things that we're doing. But to your point, the more complex sales, I never see that happening. And like I say in the book, like, you can either agree on the basis of what I just said about the emotional and the psychological level of this, or you can agree on the basis that if you have a robotic sales process, AI can learn a program, right? So the importance of leaning into authenticity and being human is simply because, what makes you different than AI is your ability to um, is your ability to be human, right? So yeah, those are the reasons why I think that we will never see a full replacement of salespeople by AI. I agree with you.
And you're totally right because yes, Dennis Rodman, controversial, but true, that guy is he. And what I would also add is that people don't like this, but presenting an honest version of you means that a lot of people actually will not like you. It's by
Yeah,
design. The moment you're authentic is the moment more people will not like you. I remember I was in corporate and I had to walk into the office and put on a mask because I knew that a lot of people wouldn't like me there and I needed that job back then, right?
right.
So the moment you're you is the moment also you draw this line and there's people who like you and people who don't. But guess what? Everybody knows they can trust you because
Yes.
you will not bend, you will not be manipulative, you will not be disingenuous. And eventually at that job, I ended up doing that. I just show myself for who I am and I ended up being liked and also hated. Anyway, you brought me to realize something. You mentioned how AI has an agenda. And usually when people picture the idea of a bad salesperson is somebody who is manipulative, which means they have an agenda that they need you to comply to conform with, which leads me to think any AI sales agent will be by definition manipulative because it is
Yeah.
coded to get you to get an outcome out of you,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
their outcome and not what's best for you.
Yeah. I mean, there's literally a whole space. I mean, look, there's a lot of controversy about Chat GPT and Grok and all these different like AI-based tools, whether they have political bias one way or the other. There's examples where you ask it a certain question about one political party and it tells you this, and you ask about the other political party and it makes fun of them, and then there's all different sorts of examples. You can plug in different situations, like, what's going on in different parts of geopolitical conflicts around the world, and it takes what would be considered a bias in these scenarios, depending on which tool you're using. And there's actually a whole space now about understanding what's in the black box, from like an ethics and morality perspective. Like there's a whole market now of people that are selling tools to companies to help them understand whether or not their AI is being used correctly, right? So like the fact that that's even a thing is all you need to know. And Sebastian, to your earlier point about you know, this idea of kind of being liked or hated or kind of presenting an honest version of yourself, like, or being trusted and all that. Todd Capone, who wrote this book, The Transparency Sale, I think really aligns with this. But one of the examples I like to give is like, if you go into a restaurant and you ask like, at the steakhouse and you ask the waiter, like, what's the best thing on the menu? And they're like, honestly, the chicken nuggets are like the best in the planet. And they're not trying to sell you the steak or something like that. Well, that's a less expensive item. But now when he goes and tells you that like all these sides and desserts are great, you're probably gonna like believe him because you don't feel like he's trying to sell you something. It's no different in a sales meeting. Like if you lead off by telling them all the things you can't do, which again, very counterintuitive, it's gonna put way more gravitas or really gravity on the things you can do when you get there. They're gonna be like, well, this guy's honest. I mean, he told us everything he can't do. So when you actually start telling about the things you can do, it gives you a lot more weight. So that's not something that AI would normally do if it has an agenda, right? Like AI is not going to just go into that mode, I think. I think that that's the big challenge there. And yes, you're right. With an agenda, AI, humans are very much alike in that regard.
Yeah, which is why we talk about qualification in the sales process, right? Because you sell to a lot of people, you don't close everybody you sell to because they don't fit, because you don't fit. You cannot serve them properly. It's not for them or they're not for you. It's part of I think, the ethos of the sales world to not push onto people solutions that don't fit them because it doesn't benefit you reputation wise, doesn't benefit them budget wise or even results wise.
Yeah, 100%. Um, and yeah, qualification is a huge part of it. I think, again, as human beings, we have egos and we think that what we have, everyone needs. But the reality is not even that someone might not need it, but it's also just, do they need it right now? Or are they even the most qualified? Like maybe they could use it, but like, are there other people that are better for us to be spending our time with based on their more urgent need or pain? And so, yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. And I think, one of the things that I've noticed in my career, it's a kind of a karmic outcome, but it like when I'm honest with people that say no, like when I get to a no, like, honestly, I'll try to get to a no on purpose sometimes. Like if I know that it's just like not a good fit, like I just want to get to know so we can move on. The customer actually will like end up kind of coming back to me at some point in the future. They will remember that I wasn't sleazy. They will remember that, I wasn't trying to push something on them. They'll remember me because of that. And when they do have that problem, they do come back. And that's happened many, many times where because I was doing like what I think is the right thing ethically, the customer remembered and they came back to me when the time was right. So the timing doesn't always need to be right now. It can be whenever is right for them. And if you treat it that way, you'll get a good outcome. But if you push them, chances are when the time is right, they might go to someone else.
Yeah, it happened to me this morning. I was on a sales call for a sales training, a workshop, and I found out the guy had fired his entire sales team. A small sales team, but he had fired them all. And I was like, okay, he had no sales team. It makes no sense to have a workshop. So let's talk, like, when do you want to talk again? He goes, in a month. We talk in a month. There was no need to just pressure him into anything because he has no
Yeah.
sales team right now. He needs to reshape that. He doesn't need a workshop. For whom?
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And also, yeah, and I love the way you just frame that. It's like, when do you want, when do you want me to be, in touch? You need to say like, hey, let's do this instead, or, let me sell you this other thing. He's probably stressed out. He just fired his whole team. He's got other things to worry about. So I think that's a great example.
Yeah, just it's how you do things. And as you said, it's happened to me before. You say no to somebody in in the mind of a beginner, no is always like this final thing, but sometimes it's just no for now. Like you said,
Yeah.
they will need you at some point. They will think about you because maybe you were the one sales representative or company that didn't try to manipulate them into, oh, you don't want this, so let me downsell you into this. And if you don't want that, I will downsell you into this thing that's two steps below in my ladder. So I can still walk out with something cool to tell my sales manager today.
Yeah. No, exactly. And by the way, like this is all transferable to other spheres, right? Like I was recently in the job. I just accepted a new job, but I was recently in the job market. And I can give you multiple examples where, one example, I talked with a founder of a company who was looking for a sales leader, and through conversation, I came to my own conclusion that I thought it was too soon for him to have a sales leader. And I told him that. I said, I just don't think it's the right time for you. But he organically wanted to do some consulting work. So I got a consulting contract out of this because I wasn't trying to push something on him that he didn't need. But then that gave him a certain confidence that I'm trustworthy and that maybe we could work on a different type of capacity. Um, there was another example of this where it didn't end up with a consulting opportunity, and that's fine. It was a conversation that I very vividly remember because we both left feeling really good about each other. And who knows, maybe 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now, who knows what it will lead to in the terms of the relationship we built because we mutually kind of came to an understanding that this startup might have been not in the right timing to hire a head of sales. So I think when we have the mindset that we need to sell people, we lose out on the discovery. We lose out on understanding if it's a good opportunity for us. And so these are always two-way streets, and we treat it that way goes a lot better.
It's funny you mentioned that you brought back memories. Some people do close themselves after you tell them you're not a good fit. They go, okay, so in which other capacity can I work for you? And then they will come up with what they actually need from you at that moment. And then they either close themselves and into something you didn't expect, or they just, you let them go and they come back eventually, which is a wonderful feeling because you maybe at that point you don't expect the interaction to go anywhere. Then they still come up with something and they want you for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love the expression you use, they close themselves. I use a different expression, but it's the same idea. It's that people will talk themselves into doing something, and I was actually running a discovery workshop yesterday for a company that I advise, and I was kind of explaining that in discovery, it's better that if you're talking as little as possible and getting as much as you can from the customer, because a lot of times it's almost like talk therapy. You go to see your therapist and you talk about what's going on in your life, and by kind of talking it out and kind of having someone to talk about what your challenges are, you'll kind of talk yourself into the answer, you know, because you just need someone to listen, and it's no different. So I love that analogy or like the expression you use, they close themselves. Well, they can also talk themselves into it. And again, in order for that to happen, what else needs to happen? We need to remove ourselves. We need to take ourselves out. They fundamentally can't talk themselves into it if we're talking. So.
I love it because you made me realize that a big chunk of my sales training is gravitates around the discovery process because it's there that the magic happens, and listening is part of it, right? It's what they teach you in hostage negotiation. You need to listen. You cannot be talking all the time because the other guy has leverage in his hands, which is lives, and you need to shut up and understand why they are kidnapping someone. That adapted to sales, that means like what you said, shut up and listen because if you listen good enough and you ask the right questions, there is a high chance that they will tell you everything they need to say yes.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole ethos. I think it's you fundamentally can't sell something to anyone unless you know what they need. And I give an example. It's like, hey, if I want to go get a burrito, and I'm trying to beg you to come with me, but you're not hungry, well, it's going to be a tough sale, right? I need to understand what you need. maybe you're lonely. Maybe maybe I can sell you on the vision of keeping me company. But either way, like I can't get, if I want something, I fundamentally can't assume that you want it too. I can't get it to you unless I know what you need.
And it's why like you shouldn't trust people who go by the old thing. I could sell ice to an Eskimo. Then you're a scammer because
Yeah.
you're manipulating them. They don't need ice, right? Could sell ice to an
Right.
Eskimo. That's a red flag, bro.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, people who say that, that is a red flag. Um, being good at sales, it's funny. This person that I've been working on kind of consulting arrangement, he said, I don't think I'm very good in the selling because I'm more of a consultative seller person. I'm trying to understand, their current workflow and what's wrong about it. And I'm like, hey, I said, hey, you actually just described like what a really good salesperson is. He's like, really? Yeah. He's like, I think a lot of people who are not in sales, they think it's very different. They think that you need to be charismatic. They think that you need to be good at explaining concepts or doing PowerPoints. Those are all like table stakes, right? Like that's not what makes people good at sales. What makes people good at sales is really getting to a core intent, asking why over and over again. Not necessarily in that way, but getting to a real source of truth for why the problem exists and what are the stakes and what are the implications. That's what makes sellers really, really good.
I love it because, as weird as it sounds, that used to be me. When I first started out, for years I told myself I suck at sales because I'm shy. And I knew salespeople, but they were the talkative kind, right? They were very charismatic and they were almost overwhelming. And that was my idea of salesperson. And then got into business and I realized I'm closing people. Like people, that's where I came up with the expression. People are closing themselves because it didn't feel to me like I was selling. I was just talking to them, and at some point they were, "Oh, so how can we work together?" And I got the business. And it took me reconnecting with the people that taught me hostage negotiation to just bring it all together and realize, fuck, I've been selling all this time. I just had the wrong idea about it because I thought I had to talk. Instead, all the time had been selling. I just had to listen.
Yeah. No, by the way, like I'm right there with you. For the first 3 years of my career, I didn't know this. I was getting by on work ethic. I hustled really hard. Story I tell people is we'd have these cold calling competitions and I wouldn't leave my room. I didn't go to the bathroom for 8 hours. I didn't eat or drink water. I just made cold calls. So I was getting by on like work ethic and to some degree personality and things like that. But I didn't run real discovery. I didn't have a process. It was just like cold call and demo and close. Um, and I remember I did a sales training in the next company I worked for is a bigger company, and the CEO asked us what's the most important skill to have in sales. And I didn't know the answer. The answer was listening. And that's what I talk about in my book. Kind of stole the idea, but I think it's, universally accepted to be true. But yeah, I'm right there with you. So don't feel bad. I think it's something that probably means that in the sales profession, we need to do a better job of training people. Because a lot of people, I don't think they get this right away.
Especially if you're trained the old way, it can get pretty hard. Or if you're getting, as you said, if you're mentioned, you're getting pushed in this overly regimented process. You
Yep.
lose sight of the fact that you're dealing with another person that is there because they need to solve an issue. It doesn't matter if you're selling IT infrastructure or if you're selling candy. They want something because they need something. They have a problem to solve. And if you don't listen to their problem, you will not get their money. Basically, because you don't know what you're actually there for. You don't know what they need from you. It's so
Yep.
important. And listen, we touch upon your book several times without ever diving deep because it keeps getting interesting. So I keep taking tangents. But tell us more about your book. How did that come about? When did you write it? How long did it take?
Sure. Well, I joked earlier about how I went to school with all these like, um, really smart and attentive kids who went into all these, great industries. I majored in English and creative writing in college, so people were wondering what I was doing, spending my time, writing short stories and things like that. But eventually, I took my writing skills into the world of sales and then writing a book. So part of it, to answer your question, is that I've always been interested in writing. A long-term goal of mine is to actually have more of a career in the world of writing or maybe even screenwriting. And so the book was a way for me to start diving or maybe dipping my toe into the water, if you will, because it was adjoined to my career. So I felt that writing the book would be not risky at all because if anything, it would just help my current career. And if it sucked, then who cares? Like it just didn't matter, right? So that was part of it. It was during COVID, so I had some free time. I had found that I had had a lot of success by building really strong relationships at the company that I just exited at. I'd sold multi-million dollar deals there into like a lot of Fortune 500 brands that were very time consuming and complex. And I'd won these deals against much bigger competitors. And I didn't have the same formal and rigid process that these competitors had. So I wanted to kind of share this philosophy. And then I'd say the last factor was, COVID was a particularly polarizing time. Here in the United States, I feel like every day is more polarizing than the last one in terms of the political climate. But I had noticed during COVID that like a lot of people were at each other's throats, like on social media. Someone would call someone a racist, and then they would respond by calling them a snowflake. And on both sides, I would think to myself, how do they feel that they're possibly changing that person's mind by calling them names? And that maybe if people adopted the acumen that salespeople have, which is really predicated around authenticity, empathy, listening, um, not presuming to have all the answers, right? Like that's a part of we talked about qualification and things like that. Um, that maybe they'd be better in terms of how they dialogue with others and how they deal with other people. So that was the motivation for it. It probably took me like 6 to 9 months, start to finish. It was pretty quick for me actually, just because writing is pretty um, fluid for me. But I'd say where I spent most of the time was on the revisions. A lot of people proofread it. The final version was very different than the original. And yeah, it really helped for me. I didn't have like I said, I didn't have an agenda for it. I wasn't like doing it to make money. I didn't make a lot of money doing it, frankly. But it was really more just because I genuinely wanted to like get some of these ideas out there. And it helped me, I think, build some credibility. It helped me get opportunities to do consulting and advisory work and things like that. And so I'm very grateful for that and that people overall, felt pretty good about it.
I always tell people I've written and published several books, so I always tell people that you never, because people ask me, how much money did you make? That almost nothing. That's the reality, and it doesn't matter because you never write a book unless you want to write professionally, like I don't know novels. You never write a book for the money. You write a
Yep.
book because you have something to get out of your system, a message, a story. You have wisdom to share, experience to share, and you need to share it with the world. Or you write it for all those reasons and for the authority, because as you said, it opens doors for you. It's a great business card. You're an author. It gets you speaking engagements. It gets you invitations here and there. People pay more attention to what you say, even if they never read the book. Those are the reasons why you write a book, never for money. And you took the right approach. Also, I completely agree. Um, I think the best guy out there taking principles from hostage negotiation and putting them into everyday life is Chris Voss.
Yep.
I'm a massive fan. He's the absolute master. And I think if people saw the world from the lens of proper sales, we will have much less conflict because you live better. You learn to accept that, other people's political ideas are their fucking political ideas. It's
Right.
fine. You don't need to share
Right.
them. It's funny because I took my sister to a concert a few weeks ago, and the band has is very political, and they have the opposite of my ideas. But I
Hmm.
still enjoy their music a lot because I like their music. I don't care what they think. I'm happy that they're very. I'm happy that they're honest because they are firm in their beliefs. I respect that and I love the music. I think more people should just chill about it because just like you, I noticed that every day it gets apparently worse. And for
Yeah.
what? For what reason? It makes no sense.
I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, I think it's look at like we said in sales, you get your ideas rejected a majority of the time. And yet when it comes to these parts of our personal lives, whether it's politics or other dealings, we get so offended by it when our ideas are rejected. And the reality is that not to be too zen here, but in the same way, like I always talk about in sales, that if you can lose attachment to the outcome, you'll be so much better off. Like if you can just not care about how it goes one way or the other, that's great. And you'll just behave better in the meeting if that's how you take it. And that we are all kind of just specks of dust in the universe, and that we place kind of like disproportionate emphasis on whatever is right in front of us. And I think the same is true for what you just said, like the band or whatever, people's political ideas. People have a really hard time with that because we're kind of programmed, meant like our thoughts and ideas are kind of shaped by all these things that have happened to us. We have a hard time distinguishing the feelings we get from reality. And I think that that's spot on what you just said, that we would all be a lot better off if we could just empathize that others are doing their best, that they might reject our ideas, they may have their own ideas, and that they got to those places genuinely because of information that they had, and that they are trying to get from point A to point B in the best way possible. And if we can just give everyone that grace, we'd all be a lot happier. So I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, also even in politics, I don't think everybody wants to see the economy crash, right? On any side of the point. That's just a dumb way of saying that we basically want all the same things.
Mhm.
Proper housing, affording stuff, living a nice life.
Right.
Anything besides that should be, it's pointless to just start hate other people because of that.
I agree. And I think that's why, the thing about sales skills is so important. A lot of people don't see themselves as salespeople. They view salespeople as these weaselly people when they go to the used car dealership or something like that. The reality is we're all salespeople in some way, shape, or form. The company I was giving this discovery training to yesterday is in the ed tech space, and the people that I was giving it to are former educators, and now they're salespeople. But I basically told them, like, you were still salespeople when you were teachers. You were selling ideas to students, right? So you had to figure out a way to do that in the best way possible. So we're always selling ideas. Um, we're always selling ourselves, our ideas to others. And I think that it's important that because of that, more people look at what they can gain from being good at sales.
Yes, I tell people something similar, which is you're always negotiating. It
Yep.
doesn't matter what you're doing, you're always negotiating. You're on a date, you are negotiating. You are dealing with another human who has their goals, who has their feelings. It's it's a skill that you can neglect if you really want to do well in some areas of life, or at least in the areas of life that involve other people, which tend to be the important ones anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I agree. You know, your marriage, you're negotiating, right? I agree. Like the most important things in your life require real negotiation, real ability to listen, real empathy, and understanding.
You wrote another book, right? How Boys Learn.
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So that one's, not going to be as not as exciting to your audience, but I'll talk about it anyway. When I was in college, you write a senior thesis. Because I was, the English and creative writing guy or whatever, I got to do a creative thesis, which was a set of short stories. I wrote these stories under an advisor called Edmund. His name's Edmund White. He's actually a very famous author in the United States, and um, the stories were about various. The one thing they had in common is that they had male protagonists who were trying to navigate their way through the world, and kind of dealing with different challenges. There's one story about a wrestler in high school. There's another story about an all-boys high school where one of the students gets in a bad car accident, and how it affects the kids at the school. Um, so yeah, all these years later, I decided I wanted to publish them. I reworked these stories, I edited them, and put them out for publication. Actually, about this time last year. So that was cool. Like I said, I want to get more into writing, and I started with a sales book, and now I'm maybe working my way towards other things to see how that can go.
Listen, keep doing that. Writing, I wrote several novels, and writing is so fulfilling. It takes time. You have to love it because it is painful. It is slow, but the moment something is done, it's wonderful. The moment something is done and edited, it's great. And the moment you end up publishing it in any form, it's just the payoff is for you as a person. It's there are no words for it, right? So the writing is keep pursuing that. It's so good.
I agree. No, I appreciate that. I agree. Like being able to get these ideas off your chest and seeing them impact others in a positive way is the best feeling to me.
Damn, I love that final message because I'll say let's leave it at that. Leave it and end it on a high. Listen, Jeff, thank you for coming on the show. Where can people find you, find your books? Where can people learn more about you, get in touch with you?
Sure. I've got a website, jeffkirchick.com. That's where all the stuff is. So they can find me there. And yeah, all the books, all the interviews, all the stuff is on there as well.
Perfect. People, you heard it. That was the Take of Tomorrow podcast with Jeff Kirchick. It was great, Jeff, having you here. Thanks for taking the time. We made it.
Yes, we did. Thanks. I really enjoyed our conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Same for me, a lot of fun. And people, I will see you in the next episode. Do not forget to subscribe, follow, comment, support the show. If you enjoy it, also share with somebody you love because maybe you will be doing them a favor by getting them into sales. Bye bye.